Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well? I'm going to try to stay down here. If it doesn't work, I'll stand up there, but it's kind of nice. So, first of all, thank you to Lynn, first of all. It's just been amazing working with you, and then Annette, Emily, and Stephanie. Thanks for all of the welcome, and we had a lovely time yesterday kind of getting ready for today. So, like this social connectedness stuff, you know. I'm a kind of an ROI guy, right? You know, I like impact. I like bottom line. And here I stand, you know, and it feels kind of soft, right? You know, it's because what do you do with this, right? I mean, so it's all these feelings. So what do you do with all these feelings, right? Especially being a guy, like, you know. So think about this. Do a lot of training with police. And I asked them, how many police does it take to make a neighborhood safe? Right? It always throws them, by the way, you know. And they say, well, at the end, they kind of discuss it for a while, and then they say it depends. And on what? Well, on how well people kind of know each other, and whether they might even care if something was going on their street. Wow. How many of you have to do municipal budgets? I don't know if it's like this in the United States, but in Canada, it's the number one fastest growing budget line is policing. And though crime has been dropping dramatically in Canada, the perception is the opposite. What's that about? So this is costing a lot of money, this misperception about crime, about feeling safe, right? And no matter how many police we put out there, that number doesn't seem to go down. So we have a dissatisfied customer, right? So think about it. Over 80%, probably even higher in the United States, of caring in Canada is not paid for. Just think about that. It's a radical thought. It changed my world when I started thinking about this. So that means around 20% are like police and teachers and daycare workers and hospital workers, right? All of those people really matter, but they're like 20% of our caring infrastructure, right? This is kind of interesting, right? This is kind of where conservatives and liberals merge. Because the conservatives kind of feel like, you know, family and community and voluntarism is kind of at the heart and soul of community, and you should have less government, right? And so the more government you have working in that space, the more problems you have. And then the liberals, you know, they just want people to be happy, right? And so like this whole caring thing is kind of important, right, about it happening. But imagine now, just for a moment, what happens when 80% of all caring turns into 75%, turns into 70%? Kids come home from school and no one gives a damn about their report card. Key factor in their mental health. Key factor about whether they're going to be good students. What happened? Right? Who's going to fill that gap? Right? So you start thinking about that even further. Start thinking about early release from hospital and family to take care of someone versus home care, which is being cut back in our communities anyway quite a bit. It's expensive. So now what happens if that person isn't there? What's the health outcome of that individual? You're starting to see where I'm going with this. And then the thing is, we're not replacing it. So we have a lot of demands from the customer to give us more because they're feeling less supported by the system. That's the 20% that's getting paid to care, but we can't afford to put more money into that, right? Nor maybe should we. It's not necessarily better to have more professionals in the world, right? That caring is a pretty important part of democracy. It's a pretty important part about why America and Canada have one of the highest qualities of life in the world, is because we care for one another. We take care of one another. It's not just because government spends a whole lot of money on professional services. We feel that's important and that's good, but that's not the beginning and the end. And so just the myth of Canada, you might call us socialist, but we're kind of socialist capitalists, right? And we like capital, we're more capitalists than we are socialists, right? But the reality is that we've just come, when you call us socialists, it's just really around things like Medicare, right? Because we've come to understand that there's certain things that when you invest into them heavily, they're good for the economy, right? And the problem when you don't have Medicare, right, is that when someone falls on hard times and isn't well insured, they basically go bankrupt. And that's not good for the economy, right? Honestly, that's why we have Medicare. It's economic reasons, right? Honestly, I know that you kind of have a really interesting president right now who's got a lot of bravado, right? But everywhere I go in America, there are as many caring people, right, and as many kind of good social systems as there are in Canada. So don't listen to what I'm saying, right, and say, oh, that works in Canada, but that doesn't work in the United States. Canada is as different across the country as the United States is across the country. Halifax is like Maine. Right? Vancouver's like LA, right? Like they're or maybe more like San Francisco. But it's quite, Toronto is very much like New York. It's like, anyway, I get it. Nothing's quite like New York. But, it's one of those things where we're really cousins. And I think maybe the only defining thing about Canadians is, right, if you want to get a lot of Canadians out of the pool, and you want to get them out really, really fast, what do you say in Canada? No, hey guys, let's get out of the pool. That defines us more than almost anything about being Canadian. Right? We just have this sense that we kind of, I don't know what it is, but it's pretty easy to get people out of the pool. I think there's a lot of really independent, I find in the US, there's lots of independence, right? Don't make me wear that motorcycle helmet, oh, okay, We're a bit more conforming that way. So I want to talk about a few things today. But before I do, before I talk about that even, I want you to open your minds a little bit to what you're going to hear today. And I'm saying that because the number one thing when we work in collaboration, and as you know, we've got large-scale collaboration. I do very few talks. I used to do 3 or 4 a week. Did that for 15 years as we built the Institute. We've got 25,000 members all around the world in about 3,000 cities. So we work with a very specific group of social innovators. It's a very influential group of people that are our members and that are part of our network. But what happens is that our real goal at Tamarack is large-scale change. So it's around population-level outcomes is what matters to us most, right? So we care about helping people, but what we care most about is population-level outcomes, and we're willing to put the work in and take the time. We've been putting 20 years into building a network around poverty reduction. We saw small gains every year in terms of lower poverty reduction. And in the last 5 years, we've had our biggest hit We're now down 1/3. So we had 3 million poor. It's been stable for about 25 years. We're now down to 2 million, the lowest level of poverty in our country's history, right? If we stay on the same trajectory, unless we get like a far-right government that is just, doing a lot of bravado shit, right? We're going to keep this going because it's a multi-party agreement. We are ending, honestly, it sounds stupid, we're ending economic poverty within 10 years in Canada. We got another 50% coming in the next 3 years, right? And it's just the way we're organized. And so for those of you who read the David Brooks article, it is true. The way that we've organized ourselves, but more importantly, we now have poverty reduction strategies at the federal level, the provincial level, and every city. 98.2% of all the poor in our country are within a strategy to move them out of poverty, right? At a city level. Unprecedented anywhere in the world. And what I always say, and I'm an ROI guy, you don't have a plan, right? Then what you doing? So, and it's got to be a citywide plan. It's got to be owned by the city. It's got to be owned by the Chamber of Commerce. I don't know if any of you guys saw the Philadelphia story. The Chamber of Commerce just replied to it today, and they said they're in. Right? So the Chamber of Commerce of Philadelphia is now the advocate for poverty in Philadelphia. Right? That's what we need here. That's what we need to have happen, right, if we're going to get large-scale change. Right? And for those of you who think large-scale change is all about caring for people, you're right, it is. And for those of you who care, it's all about money, saving money, making money, improving the quality of life for your city. It's about that too, right? So we got to work at this together. But what I find is our mental models, are just so entrenched. Right? This idea of the poor will always be with us. Almost all of us know that statement. And deep down, we kind of believe it. Right? And if you actually, I'm a theologian by training, so if I piss you off because I'm kind of preacher-like, just forgive me. Right? Because I am like that a little bit, right? But the thing is, it's like we are so entrenched in our way of thinking about things, right? About what's important, about what's not important. So I want you today, and maybe just it's a practice, right? Let's get lost for a day. And so the most important thing in my first book, Community Conversations, that I think I wrote in there is this idea of when you work as a collaborative, as a collective, you've got to get used to and good at getting lost for a while. Because if you're not willing to get lost for a while, you're entrenched in your own way of thinking. So if I was to get this table to work better together, there's 2, 4, 6, 8 people here, that the natural instinct is to feel, first of all, either dominant, your idea is dominant and you want your idea to dominate, even if you're kind and gentle. You want to kind of win because, in a sense, it validates your mental model, and your mental model is really important to you, right? At best, there's kind of a passive-aggressive thing going on, right? And you're kind of, at minimum, you want to validate yourself so that you kind of feel like, you're good, right? But when you get lost for a while, what you're doing is you're actually wanting to get lost in Rachel's idea. And Rachel wants to get lost in Michael's idea, right? So they want to suspend what they think is true for a while. You don't have to do it for a long time, but you get lost together. And you can see as a big collaborative why that's so important. Because if you're defending your position, right, you can never learn. You aren't listening to other people. So if you're not convinced yet that getting lost is a good thing, let me tell you a little story. So a few years ago, our kids were just getting ready to leave high school, right? Like, we're not a wealthy family, but we saved for a lot of years because we wanted to give them that one big trip, right? And we talked to them, and we all agreed we wanted to go to Italy, okay? So it's a long ways away. And so we saved for that. We worked together. We planned for it. And we went. I mean, the idea was that if you can give your kids a really good experience before they leave the nest, you're kind of hoping that down the road, they might want to travel with you, or they will at least want to come and visit with you, right? Well, what we found about, just to relax a bit, so if you really want your kids to travel with you, what we've learned, the only thing you have to do is if you pay for it, they'll always come. Right? So here we are in a little place called Sorrento, right? And we're going back to Rome, and we have to stop in Naples. And if you know anything about those train tracks, they're different in Naples, going one way versus the other way. And you have to get on another train. So we're getting ready to get on this other train, and we're all sitting down, and my oldest son said, "Dad, do you have any water?" And that was my job. We all had little jobs. Mine was water, and it was 40 degrees Celsius. What's that? Double 30, about 110 average temperature in Italy at that time of year. We went when it was cheap, right? It was really hot. So anyway, we get on off. So I say, "Hey, no problem. Let me go get some." So I go to the water kiosk. Like, it's not a kiosk, but like where you put money in, like a vending machine, right? And I put my euro in, and nothing happens. And I pick it up again, put it in again, nothing happens. Put it in again, third time, nothing happens. Fourth time, put it in, click, water bottle comes down. I reach down to get it. I look up, and there goes my train. They said I looked like Mr. Bean, kind of running after it. "Wait for me, wait for me." And there was my son, his face against the window. You know? So I started walking to buy another ticket. I'd reached back. I had, luckily, not taken my wallet out. And all trains go to Rome, right? So I started walking toward the ticket booth, and this porter pulls up. Well, if you read Lonely Planet, never trust a porter in the Naples train station. But he was talking to me. I guess I had been so loud. He was so convinced he could help me, and I didn't know what he was saying, but he was speaking in this really great Italian. And so I jumped in beside him, and he took me right to the far back corner of the train station. And he gets out, goes inside the room, and all of a sudden 12 people come out of their offices, and they're all laughing and looking at me, right? So I'm sort of this, you know. And anyway, they send someone out to come and get me, another porter, and he walks with me to a stairwell. And we start walking down the stairs. We go down one flight of stairs. We go down two flights of stairs. As we're going down the third flight of stairs, all I'm thinking is, when he asks me for my wallet, I'm just going to give it to him, right? We get to the bottom of the stairs, and there's a huge platform, train platform, but there is nobody on it. It's completely empty. Well, what I found out later is that we were now on the high-speed platform that comes underneath the main train station. It's the European line, and it was the one I was too cheap to buy, right? Because the family was on the regular one up top, right? So the train stops. No one gets on but me. So they literally stopped the train, the Euro train, to come and get me, and knowing that my family was on the other one. Isn't that beautiful? Like, that's really cool. Anyway, so I get onto the train, no ticket, no nothing, right? And they put me at the front of the train, and I walk all the way to the back of the train, and there's literally not a seat to be had. So I'm in the very back car of a train. What's at the back of every train? It's like, first of all, 4 women all at the same time. A bathroom? We're open. Like, there's a bathroom on every car, right? So just so you're okay, Italy's good. Anyone else? The back car, the whole car. It rhymes with car. Bar! There you go! So, I'm going into a bar. It's a big party. People are having the greatest time. There was a bunch of Germans there. I happen to know German because it's my background. I'm talking German with them, and then there's this porter who comes into the back car wanting tickets, and every time they came in, someone gave them a shot, so none of us had to show our tickets, so I don't even run into any problems for not having a ticket. And a little later on, I met this guy named Mario from the University of Milan, and he was an expert in community economic development. I'm a total total community economic development geek. We stood the whole way, 2.5 hours, and I asked him every question I had. I've read so much on Italy's economic development principles, and learned so much, right? So we get to Rome, right? And he says to me, Mario says to me, Paul, like, I know exactly what track your family's coming in. Hey, and I said, I know what car they're in, right? He said, so let's go find them. So we get running out of our train, and we run down to their train, and just as we get to their car, there they are coming down the stairs. I hold up my bottle of water. And I say, sorry I took so long. So just want to come back to this because as from that story, it's a funny story, it's a true story. It's a funny story, but it kind of helps you understand this rhythm about getting lost, right? And even this idea of social connectedness, like, it's not something we talk about every day, right? And I literally, I was talking to Teal about this. I was working in British Columbia, one of our third largest states. It's a province in Canada. And when we came back with those school stats, the teachers told us where to go, basically. He said, we don't want more work. I was like completely pissed off. Like, what is this? Right? This is really important, isn't it? Right? And they're going not to our outcomes because we're not measured on any of that stuff. Right? Now, honestly, I didn't talk to the teachers. I talked to the teachers' union and to the administrators. They're equally deserve one another, I think, in that province, right? Like, it's just bizarre. Like, I was just going like, really? But the thing is, when we move ourselves into a little bit of a different mindset, right? So like this idea of a mental model, it's really important because mental models are made up of what's called ladders of inference. And your ladder of inference are all the education you got, right? Everywhere you grew up, right? All of the experiences you've had as a child and an adult. And all of that together help to shape your understanding of what neighbor should be and what maybe your longing for neighbor should be, what health should be, and what you define health as, what good education is, or the value of education. All of those experiences that you've had, right? It's often why I say it just sucks to be a boss because you have to kind of live up to the leadership figures in everybody's life, right? And of course, all of their leadership figures that people choose to remember as part of their mental models are their ideal ones, right? They forget about all the crappy ones, or at least they just remember the crap from the crappy ones, right? So they put all of that on you. Anybody feel that way as a boss sometimes, It's hard to compete with someone's mental model. But it's an important thing to think about when we're trying to collaborate, right? So if we're going to want to work on social impact in any way in our community, we have to stop thinking about that's their stuff. That's why today, a good part of what I want to do is I want to work with you on two levels. So I want to, first of all, I need you to feel social connectedness. Like, why it matters to you, Rebecca. That's what I need to know. Not right now, right? Not in front of all these people, right? At lunch. But why does it matter to you? I need you to understand that for you. So for those of you, how many of you have children in your lives? Either direct or nephews and nieces? Yeah. So if you care about them, why does social connectedness matter to them? So when Marlene and I got married, our big idea was that we wanted to, even our wedding, we wanted it to be an inclusive wedding that would celebrate community more than us. So it would celebrate the people we loved and the people who we thought would keep us in relationship and who we wanted to be in relationship with. And so we opened ourselves to them and created an experience for them, rather than saying, and it was beautiful for us, but rather than it being kind of our day, it was our day, right? So it's this sense, but what we wanted more than anything is that if we had children, we wanted to somehow have them have the experience of community in their lives, right? So even though I'm a preacher, we went back to church. Hardest thing I ever did. Nobody even laughs at that one. That's kind of funny, right? Like everyone's going, man, that's really hard. Yeah, I would never do that. Anyway, and we got them, when we did sports teams, we were always the family that had all the parents over, so that it was more of a sense of community rather than just, playing hockey against each other or whatever you did, right? We made it really, really, really important that our neighbors, and we were really lucky, we kind of fell into a neighborhood where, for the first 15 years of their lives, you basically didn't know who was coming for dinner. You didn't know if your kids were going to be home for dinner. It was like one of those things, right? If you were running late, it was a phone call. They were taking care of you. On Friday nights, we actually built a big gazebo just where all the neighbors could come, and that's the only time we drank, honestly. And then at least one neighbor would stay sober to take care of the kids, right? It was like one of those greatest neighborhoods ever, right? That was where they were. But we wanted that for our kids. And then what happened is that everyone around us wanted that for their kids as well, because we were able to talk to them about this. And what we found out, and what I still find out, I work with just so many neighborhoods. When I wrote the book, I organized a neighborhood of 1,000 homes. Right? Can you just imagine? I just said to my staff, hey, we're going to go organize that neighborhood. And they went, what? And I said, yeah, and we're going to take 1,000 homes. So go measure it, right? So we went and got 1,000 homes, started organizing it, built a huge neighborhood association. I'll tell you more about them later. And this is the craziest neighborhood association. They just had their porch party, their 7th porch party last year. And it was 4th porch party, sorry, because the book's not that old. And we had over 10,000 people come to our porch party, right? And our neighborhood with 1,000 homes, we can often get between 500 and 600 homes to show up at things, a really active neighborhood association. You know that we took a lot of Syrians in as Canada, right? We had this great thing happen in Canada where we have this amazing prime minister. He's so good. Prime Minister Trudeau. Pardon? And he, well, come on. Oh, anyway, I don't want to say that I'm one or the other, but honestly, I don't know. Wouldn't care if Barack Obama was Republican. Honestly, I wouldn't. I still think he's one of the greatest people that's ever walked the face of this earth, but he was such a great president. The reality is that, we were able to organize this in a way that that they would really come to appreciate and understand community as their defining factor. And the principles in the book were actually what we used to organize the neighborhood. And so many neighborhoods are now organized around those principles, and we have already the largest neighborhood network now in our region, anywhere in our country. So it's really quite exciting to see what can happen if you can sort of bring people together. And what we've just found is everyone loves being a good neighbor, even when you don't think you do, right? Even when you don't think you do. It's so interesting. Again, we had one of our neighborhoods. We live just on the outskirts of it. So we live right in the middle, kind of in purgatory between the highest income neighborhood on our right and our lowest income neighborhood in our community on our left. So we're right in the middle of that. There's a strip of houses, and we're one of those. What's interesting, in the highest value neighborhood, they're not necessarily the highest value homes. But what happened is a university professor inherited 300 acres of land right beside the university, and rather than selling it, he thought he would develop it. And what he did is he developed it in a way that would follow the principles of community. This is before my time. This neighborhood's been around for quite a while. And no one's ever replicated it, and I don't know why, because when you look at economically, these 300 acres of homes, so for those of you who are in development here from any of the cities, that's one heck of a lot of homes, huh? Those 300 acres of homes have consistently, year after year, increased more in value than any other homes in the entire region of Waterloo, which is the Silicon Valley of Canada. So just give you that sense. And what he did is he took, like, first of all, 10 feet off everyone's backyard and built laneways behind, but not roads, pathways, right? And then planted trees. So now it's like you're hiking through a forest right in the middle of the city, because he planted trees on each side with a 20-foot pathway in the middle, and there are hiking trails that you can go through, or biking trails, right? And there's still an element of shade. He had to sign a covenant that you wouldn't build a fence to block it off. So you had to interact with people. Neighbors could cross over and talk to one another. For every so many hundred homes, he built a pool and a tennis court. And everyone had to pay $300 a year to be a member there, right? So that they would then all get to use it. And that's where they would naturally go and get to know one another. So he did all of this. And so the reason people love Beechwood, right, is because it's got this amazing sense of community, right? And they're willing to pay for it. And that's what people didn't get, right? And I think ultimately, what I'm just trying to say in my opening here is, let's just see that this could be a good thing. This talking about social connectedness could be a good thing, and it could save your city like a ton of money, right? And it could improve the quality of life in ways that all the programs that you want to spend money on together won't produce. This could produce more. And the thing is, it's kind of long-lasting. It's sustainable. When neighbors get to know neighbors, they kind of want to stay in that neighborhood. So you invest in it, it's a 20-year outcome, right? And even longer, because now the kids come back and buy their parents' house, the greatest compliment to the neighborhood. And then they've got the skills they need to do things. Now, all of that aside, right, now let's just start thinking and stop calling it social capital. Let's start calling it or social connectedness. Let's start calling it community, right, in a broader sense. Let's talk about participation rates, right, and contribution rates. Right? So the thing is now, what we really want to be a great community, a great city, is we need a high level of participation. We put an event together, we need lots of people to come to that event. More importantly, we need lots of people who want to volunteer at that event, right? And to make it a great event. That's participation. When we have a new theater group in town, participation is, even if that theater group sucks, we all go to see the play, right? Because we know that eventually they won't suck anymore, right? And we build them up, and we encourage them, right? Contribution is this amazing thing, right? I mean, at its most basic level, we're voting, right? It's the most basic thing we do. We contribute, right? It's interesting for me around this. You guys have so many vets in the United States. It's so cool. Like I'm on the boat and I'm talking to all these vets and I'm having these great conversations with vets, right? And it's kind of like, and what I love is and I did it. And I don't know why I did it, but everybody who talks to a vet, they all go, "Thank you for your service," right? I'm not making light of that, right? So I ended up with this vet. We had a great conversation. We exchanged emails and everything, and I said, "Hey, thank you for your service." It was great doing that. Like, it was so cool. But, that contribution, right, and recognizing it, right? Now imagine if we did that in all kinds of places, right? All these beautiful people who helped us here today to come together to learn. Thank you for your service, right? The people who are helping our neighborhoods to be safe. Thank you for your service. The police officers, right? Our nurses, right? So it's this kind of sense where we are contributing, but it's an attitude of contribution. We value the contribution that people give. So let's just put all that together for a bit. Participation, contribution. It's kind of beautiful, huh? It's kind of beautiful. So what I want you to do, because you've been sitting for a while, even though you've been standing for a little while as you were sort of there, I want you to talk to one another. I'm going to do a little 20-minute exercise. And basically what it means is that you're going to find two people you don't know. If you really are a high achiever, find two people you don't know who are least like you. right? So whatever that means to you, age-wise, gender, that kind of thing. And I want you to form a triangle, right? If you're sitting, I don't want you sitting at the edge of the table. So Stephanie, if you pulled in here, literally come in here. Now you would have a triangle, a little bit better triangle. Oh. Perfect. You got it, okay? If you want to stand, do that as well, okay? So I want you to find two people that you do not know, and I want you to form one of these triangles, and I'm going to give you the next level of instruction, okay? Okay, let's go. So here's your question. Isn't that a great picture? That's a friend of mine took that. We have a lot of old order Mennonites in our community, which are people we have 5,000 families in our community that still drive horse and buggies, right? And they're phoning one another, but they're not allowed to have phones. So that's why they're laughing. It's really cute. Anyway, so the question is, why is it important that I am here today? Okay? Now, there's only one, honestly, my boss sent me, if I didn't come, they were going to fire me, right? That's not okay, okay? I mean, it's kind of like, why does this topic matter to you, right? What's your story? Why does it matter to you, right? And it can matter from a work perspective, it can matter as an individual, right? But why does social connectedness, why does community matter to you? Okay, so you're each going to get 5 minutes to tell your story. Right? So first of all, one of the three of you needs to do nothing, just hold the space. Put your hand up. One person per group. Okay, everybody? Okay, that's your first person. The second person, they're going to get their turn. I'm going all the way around. It's just a starting point. The second person, you ask the questions. Who wants to do that? One person per group. Okay, now, the only condition is that the only question you're allowed to ask is, ready for it? Ready for the question? Tell me more. And just like there's a million ways to say I love you, there's a million ways to say, oh, tell me more. Right? So you'll draw it out. That's a great laugh. Oh, tell me more. Anyway, I got to slow down. Okay. Now, if you haven't put your hand up yet, you start. So I'm going to be your timer. Everyone listen to this. I'm your timer. So I'll tell you when 5 minutes are up. You will not be finished your story, and that's okay. Okay? But I will say time up, move to the next person, and then we'll move on to the next person. That way, you can just relax. Everyone, your job is to listen. Why are you just asking one question? So you don't have to think. You don't have to be all that smart because you already got the question, right? How hard is it to say, tell me more, right? So you don't have to be thinking. And if you could for a while, just practice suspending the chatter in your own brain. And it's just as simple. In meditation, all we do is you breathe, right? And then when your mind goes crazy, like a monkey mind they call it, it's okay. It's going to. We know it is. You just bring it back. So just always come back to listening to that person, right? And it's an amazing feeling to be listened to for 5 minutes without someone interrupting and saying, oh, that reminds me of my story. And then they go off and tell you their story, right? You never get to finish. Okay, let's go. 5 minutes. Okay, I want to talk more about social connectedness, and I'm particularly interested now in looking at some data. But before that, let's look at a video clip. It's a brand new movie done by a friend of mine by the name of Tamarack Solomon from the Cayman Islands. He went and looked at some of the top experts around the world and asked them about community and put a new film together called Disconnected. You'll see it on Netflix soon. But right now, it's only for private release. I'm hoping somewhere down the line, you'll be able to show it as a community and have a conversation. But let's start the conversation with Disconnected by just looking at the trailer.
The more we get together, the more we get together, the happier we'll be, the happier we'll be. the happier we'll be. The happier we'll be.
We have, in North America particularly, exalted personal independence to an almost godlike state. There is no higher value than independence.
There is no higher value. There is no higher almost godlike state to an almost godlike state.
Societies have become more individualistic, and people have been more concerned with themselves.
People now entertain themselves alone, work alone, are more fragmented, more atomized.
I think it's difficult to become part of a community when you don't really know the role that you want to play.
You can feel lonely in a crowd of people. You can have lots of Facebook friends and still feel incredibly lonely.
Social isolation is the medical equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It has the same impact on health as diabetes.
There's so much change going on. I think it's very hard for a lot of young people to establish the kind of roots and community that we have in our minds about what a community should be about.
The level of social isolation is very high.
And right now, what I see, it's getting bad. It's going to get worse.
Can we as individuals be both individualistic and communal? That's the challenge of our time. Okay, so the question that I had was, oh, there he is. The question I had was, how was I going to kind of share some of these stats and data with you, knowing that you already heard some great ones from Sarah Jean and Stephanie, right? And so you'd heard a lot of stuff that was local, right? And in some ways, what you heard is, what is the problem, right? What is the problem? And I think what I'm mostly going to talk about are the consequences of the problem, right? So what are the consequences of these problems? And then we're going to spend a good part of the time talking then about what are some possible solutions. And so I'm wanting to work with you on these two levels, right? On this personal level, right, where you're telling your stories to each other, but then I also want you to think about this from a systemic perspective. Right? So each one of your organizations is part of a system, and that system is creating a quality of life in this area. Right? So the thing is, how do you bring what you're learning here today into those systems, right, to hopefully have better population level outcomes, both for the work that you're dedicated to, but more importantly, that you're part of contributing to the population health outcomes of your community overall, and how you can contribute. So we're going to talk about that as we move forward now. But what I did was I found an article that kind of caught my attention. It's by a great columnist in our area, in the Globe and Mail, which is kind of like the Canadian version of the New York Times. I can't read it all. It's a very long article. But let me read parts of it, and you'll start to see between that and the slides where we're going with this. His name is Dave McGinn, and he's a Globe and Mail reporter. In the fall of 2017, after nearly 15 years of marriage and 2 kids, my wife and I separated. It was the most painful time of my life, but those words don't do it justice, really. We'd been together for most of my adult life. I was 25 years old when we met, 31 when we had our daughter, 34 when we had our son. Now, at the age of 40, I was alone. I didn't want to talk about it with my family. I didn't want to see the look on their faces when I told them. I didn't want to worry my parents. I didn't want my brother to feel bad for me. I didn't want to admit the whole messy failure. I tried to deal with it on my own, but eventually, after waking up in the middle of the night so many times with so much on my mind, I reached a point where I could no longer deal with my feelings alone. I needed to talk to someone. I called a friend, Paul, no, not me, who I've known since we were gangly teenagers, playing video games and drinking beer in my parents' garage. As we got older, our friendship changed. As we got older, our friendship changed. Just hold on to that. Instead of video games, we went along with other friends on a golf trip each year, and we played pickup basketball regularly until I broke my foot and retired. He's one of the few close friends who still lives in Toronto, the rest having moved out to the suburbs with their families years ago. We met at a dark, quiet bar on Bloor Street on the west side of Toronto. He's a great writer, just kind of gets you right there. Our pints of beer, he asked me what was going on. As much as I had been trying to hide it for months, he must have known something was wrong. I told him everything, how my marriage had collapsed, how confused I was, how scared I felt. There was an awkward pause. The UCLA loneliness scale first appeared in 1978, but has been revised several times over the years. For academics who study the ways we connect with other people, it's the standard in the field. Subjects rank statements with never, rarely, sometimes, or often. Try it out. I lack companionship. Never, rarely, sometimes, or often. There is no one I can turn to. I feel part of a group of friends. There are people I feel close to. My social relationships are superficial. There are people who really understand me. People are around me and not with me. Around me and not with me. Superficial, that's how it feels. Over the past 18 months, the people I've talked to about friendship, some of whom I've known most of my life, some of whom I've only known a short while, have all told me that they have plenty of acquaintances, but very few close friends. One person I spoke to explained it in a way I perfectly understood. He's got at least a dozen buddies he could have a beer with after work, but how many close friends could he call if he needed help moving? Maybe one or two? There's a growing body of evidence that shows the dire consequences of loneliness, and so researchers have become increasingly interested in studying friendship to understand the myriad ways in which it functions and affects our lives. For instance, in 2010, in the Journey of PLOS Medicine, that looked at 148 studies on the link between social relationships and mortality, researchers at Brigham Young University, am I in your way? Can people see it? I guess it doesn't matter where I move, I'll be in someone's way, yeah. Found that having strong social relationships was nearly twice as beneficial as physical activity when it came to decreasing your odds of dying young. In short, suffering from loneliness was as bad for your health as being an alcoholic or smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The benefits only increase as we age. Right? So that's really interesting. In a pair of published studies in the Journal of Personal Relationships, William Chopik, a psychology professor at Michigan State University who studies friendships, looked at more than 280,000 people between the ages 15 and 99 from almost 100 countries. People who valued friendship were always happier than those who didn't. He says, But then it wasn't until midlife that the effects kept getting stronger and stronger. It's just interesting, huh? So that the effects on your well-being, it became more and more important from midlife onward. Like the effects of it were more important. In 2017, he conducted a study to determine just how important supportive friendships are in old age. He found that they were a stronger predictor of well-being. Like, this is a major study, right? A stronger predictor of well-being than were strong connections with siblings, spouses, children, and parents. It looks like friendship quality predicted whether or not you have things like heart attacks and strokes over time. Again, you know, obviously people contradicting that in some ways, but there's something about, you know, anyway, we can talk about that later. These statistics included both men and women, but men overall are a lonelier bunch and thus at greater risk. The biggest reason friendship is important for our health, according to Dr. Chopik, comes down to stress management. Friendships reduce stress, and that's associated with better health over time, he says. Other relationships can just be stressful, can be stressful a lot of the time, but friendships just exist to make us feel better. So it's kind of interesting. Family has all these dynamics, but friendships, seem to be, you want to stick at them, right? So let's go here. Friendships take work. Okay, we already did this one, right? Now let's go to this one. Okay. Friendships take work, and we can't coast on what we once had. It is difficult for both men and women in middle age to make friends for a very simple reason. It takes time to make friends. In fact, researchers even can tell you roughly just how much time. Jeffrey Hall, a communications professor at University of Kansas, recruited two groups of people, college freshmen and adults, who had recently moved to a new city and tracked their degree of closeness and time spent together with a new person. His study found that it takes roughly 50 hours together before you consider someone a casual friend, 90 hours before you become real friends, and about 200 hours to become close friends. Suppose you see someone for 3 hours at a time, that's 67 visits with each other to reach the 200-hour mark. In middle age, who has that much time to devote to making a new friend? Time is one factor for both men and women, but proximity seems to be a particularly male issue when it comes to maintaining friendships. As researchers like to say, female friendships are face-to-face, while friendships between men is side by side. What that means is that women make friendships through talking to one another directly, whereas men, in a way, become friends by osmosis, sitting at a bar, playing basketball together, watching the baseball game. Resonate? It seems like more women were laughing at that than men. By doing stuff together is different, as I had experienced. Close friendships required disclosure and reciprocity, says Peter Nardi, a professor emeritus of sociology at Pitzer College in California. In other words, sharing personal information beyond opinions about sports teams or other shared interests. One of the issues preventing men from getting close to other men is the cultural norms about vulnerability. So he kind of sort of now is debriefing more about himself. So it's an interesting article, and I can send it around for those who want to read more of it. Where the central challenge now in us having an impact on social connectedness seems to be the amount of time that we can get people to hang out with one another. Which is why I'm a huge believer that if a city wants to invest in this, the most efficient investment is in neighborhood development, right? Or in schools, or in seniors' homes. Anywhere where people have a natural connection and have a close proximity to one another. Now, there are other ways of doing this. So in my book, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, I talk a lot about the difference between shallow community and deep community, right? So all of us have actually quite a bit of community in our lives. Like right now, we're experiencing a form of community. You're going to a learning event rather than sitting at your computer listening to it on a computer screen. You have time for breaks. People laugh, you laugh together, right? Because you really like my jokes, right? So you know what I mean? And there is a reciprocity that occurs. And when that reciprocity occurs, there's a sense of, oh, I'm here. It's kind of like doing the wave at a baseball game. You guys ever do that? Yeah, you know, it's kind of fun. You guys do that at football games too? I've never been to a football game, or an American football game. But Canadian football games really don't count. But anyway, you know, so there, it's that kind of thing. So it's hard, it's something for us to now consider, right? Just take 5 minutes, just a very short time. Just maybe even if you quickly go around, just like a one-liner. What does this, how does this resonate with you? We're going to talk more deeply a little bit, but this kind of study, what's the first thing it sparks for you? The one that I just read, just at your table quickly. Okay, I know that there's so much more to say and discuss about this topic, but we're going to spend a good part of the day at it. I just needed to get your early kind of thoughts and feelings out, and also the ability to kind of resonate with it. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to talk about the study that I did to write this book. Just remember, you know, when I went to write this book, my other book had become a bestseller and was still on bestseller status in Canada. And I know it sounds so grandiose. In Canada, it's like 10,000 and you're a bestseller, right? So, you know, but you know, it still sounds good, right? You know. Anyway, it's not like New York Times or anything like that, right? So, but anyway, so my publishers really wanted me to write another one, a follow-up, which I still haven't done. I promised them I would. This one ended up taking me 5 years to write. And I wrote it because I was primarily concerned about contribution that people were making. And I was really worried about groupthink, right? That people, and so the original book had a lot more to do with fear-based communities, and I'll talk about that in a little while. And I was very worried about people kind of becoming fearful together and acting together. And when we have been at our worst as a humanity, it is when we are afraid together. Like individually, we can be afraid, but when we're afraid together, we can be really bad, right? So I kind of worked at it that way. Then after 6 editors, it came out to this, right? So whatever it is, it is. It's actually okay. It's a good, quick read. So the thing is, the study I did for it, you might find really interesting. I used a methodology called idetics. It was used by Coca-Cola to get that song. I'd like to buy the world a Coke. You know, that it's something, 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 right? That's how they came up with that song, using idetics. And I always love it because it's right brain, left brain analysis. It gets people to answer all these questions in a certain way. And then it gets them to draw pictures so that you can see what they're kind of feeling as well, and it can quantify feeling, which is really interesting. So what I ended up doing, you can, if you go to deepeningcommunity.org, it's the official website of the book, and there are extras, and you can get the whole study there. So if you're interested in studies, that's where you can get them. So this was kind of interesting for me, is just kind of looking at this broad question: what does community mean to you? And this is what they came up in order of preference, almost all equal. But I found the first one to be the most interesting because in some senses it defined community. So there was something about working together, right, that created community. Why is that important to me? Because I'm trying to understand how to make social connectedness more efficient. I don't think it takes 200 hours, right? So I'm looking for efficiencies, ROI. So if I'm going to invest in friendships, I want to invest in the kind of work that's going to make me the best friend as quickly as possible. That sounds totally reasonable to me, doesn't it? There you go. I ain't spending no 200 hours making a good close friend. Right, I'm going to go build a Habitat for Humanity at home, and I'm going to do it in 50 hours, right? So, working together. It's just interesting, huh? And honestly, you'll see later on that the deepest experience people have of community is working together with others on behalf of something greater than themselves. So that's really interesting. Mutual support is another one. It's kind of like mutual aid in a way. It happens at a variety of levels. I mean, at my age, I'm kind of worried about who's going to come to my funeral. Right? So I'm kind of looking for people, friends, my funeral. Try to be nice to people so they will come, right? But mutual support goes all kinds of ways. It's wonderful for economic reasons, right? Mutual aid, right? It's sort of the whole premise of credit unions. Mutual support is why unions started. Like there's why BIAs start, right? Like all of that stuff sort of happens, and we create these mechanisms in which we can support one another. Geography was interesting. People really care about their neighborhoods. They really care about their cities. It's really important to people in terms of their identity. Where am I from? Where was I from? Like Lynn's story was so telling, right? And still that she went way back. I still love that part where she went and knocked on the door at 5 years old. Are there any little kids that I can play with here? I could just see how cute that would be, right? Common good. So they just define community as that when we have it, it means that there is a common good, right? And belonging. Now, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to talk about what they talked about, community breakdown and that kind of thing. But this is our core challenge. If we need people to connect, if social connectedness is important, we need to find a way to make it easier and more effective. So the challenge today is not connecting with people. That's why I think social connectedness is a strained word by definition. I connect with people on Facebook in a huge way. And my friends who live a long ways away, I am so grateful for Facebook because I get to stay involved in their lives. They put all these pictures up. I love it, right? Because I have loads of friends a long ways away, right? I don't know, and I don't know other better way to keep in touch with them. So connectedness is not necessarily the problem, right? It's that next level. It's kind of when do I feel that I am going to be, if I need to, like even moving my house, I want to work together with others. Who do I call? Right? Do I have people to do that with? If there is something we want to improve in our neighborhood, who can I talk to? Right? So who can I do stuff with? Mutual support. Who is there for me at that time? And how is that? I can't call Alvin, the friend I grew up with in Abbotsford, British Columbia. It's like a 2-day trip for him to get here and back, right? And that's by plane. So you know what I mean? It's like that's not where it's going to go, and you can do it by phone, right? But you see where I'm going? Like there's so many issues, and when it's so hard to make friends, that 200-hour thing, that are going to be moderately useful to you, but it's true. Like it's not just about emotional support and all this kind of, kumbaya stuff. It's pretty much survival stuff, having good friends, right? And when you're talking about heart attacks and strokes and all that kind of stuff, like there's a lot of stuff there that goes way beyond sitting and having a beer with somebody. Because a good friend somehow makes something out of me. Nelson Mandela used to say, Ubuntu. I am because of you. I see myself through your eyes, right? It's like why people, sorry, it's why people have dogs, right? I laugh at this one because in this context, this is a stupid thing I'm telling you. But you know that saying, "I wish I could be the person my dog thinks I am." Well, in some ways, I wish I could be that person my friend thinks I am, right? Because they see me in a certain way. And I get to see myself, and I feel good about myself when I'm seen that way. And that is damn important. And particularly for our kids. I mean, I can't even say that. It's really important for our kids, but it's really important for you. And it's really important for me that we have friends like that, right? And when the world is kind of really messy and ugly, right, someone to talk that through with. Right? Not that we have to agree, but there's just something there because my identity is being shaped by my fear, right? Anyway, it's just a really, really important around the correlations and the usefulness. That's what I'm getting at, right? It's a very useful thing, this social connectedness, this community thing. It's very functional. It's why, as human beings, you know, Darwin, sorry, I go off on these tangents, but I was a preacher, so I'm allowed to, right? Darwin, you know, what was so interesting in my studies is that, and it's not this study, but in the academic study, is that like he recanted at the end and he felt horrible about his work, which is really interesting. Because he said, people are interpreting all of my work through one lens, survival of the fittest. How many of you grew up with that paradigm? Just hands up. Right? Almost all of you. But he said, I never wrote about that. I wrote about the survival of the most cooperative. He said, an individual animal doesn't get better. It's a whole species of animal that gets better. And they only get better and they only survive if they cooperate. And the better they cooperate, the more this adaptation becomes useful. Just think about that for a moment, right? Our very survival is based on our ability to cooperate. It's kind of cool when we start thinking about the ROI for social connectedness, huh? Well, I guess, you know, the reason to do it is that we all live. This is good. Because I got them both on the same page because I wanted you to see them beside one another. So I asked like 27 questions. I'm just showing you 3 or 4. But what does community breakdown mean to you? So we can feel this right away. It's the opposite of social connection. It's isolation, right? The feeling of isolation. So it's not that this senior is sitting in their senior's home and they're feeling lonely, right? Right? They're actually feeling something way worse than lonely. They're feeling isolated, that they're missing out on something, that life is going them by. Their friends are talking about their children coming to visit, and my children never come to visit. That's not loneliness, that's isolation. That's war on my heart, on my brain. That's what we're dealing with here, right? Not just loneliness. We're dealing with something much, much worse than loneliness, right? I'm under attack, and my body responds to that, right? And other people are experiencing things, and I'm left out. Very innate human response and feeling to things. The drive to individualism, right? The me, the I society, right? I'm going to talk a little bit more about weddings and funerals later and the importance of them. But you know, like this obsessiveness to spend $100,000 on a wedding and not even invite children. I was doing some work with elders, and an elder from Hawaii came. And I was having lunch with her that day, and I said to her that my kids were like 15, 16, and had never been invited to a wedding. And it took her half an hour to actually even understand what I was saying. There was nothing that she could comprehend, right? It's like she had never seen an apple before. Never had heard of this, couldn't even comprehend in her mind. And then at the end, you know what she said to me? Then how do your children learn about love? So where are, weddings? There's these cool things, right? You go to them, and, there I am with Marlene. I've been married to her for like 33 years, and, the ebbs are a lot longer than the flows, right? You know how life goes, And then you go to a wedding, and all of a sudden your hand just slides, and it just falls into hers so nicely, right? And your heart is warm. You know that feeling, right? So, and she couldn't comprehend. What did we do? How do you have a society that doesn't have that ritual? Right? I had a funeral director come to me, and in tears. He has the largest independent funeral home in our entire country. And he was in tears because he believed so deeply in his profession. And he said, Paul, churches don't do funerals anymore in our area. I've had to build 3 funeral halls to keep up with demand because people want to be buried by their pastor and in their church, and we go and we ask them, and they say, we don't do that anymore. We don't have the capacity to do a funeral. So what happens if you don't go to funerals from a young age on? How do you understand death? Or the biggest trend now is people not wanting funerals. Primarily because they're afraid no one's going to come and they're going to be embarrassed, even though they're dead, by their family. Their family will be embarrassed. We got to deal with this, right? Because this is the stuff that kills people. This is the stuff that is why this is so bad for your health. Because your body is under attack. Right? And it's so damn hard. Like, it's not just time, the 200 hours. It's how far we live away from people, what we spend our time at, right? How to get people away from that, how fickle we are with our time. There's something deeper. We'll talk longer about that. But then, lack of caring and support, conflict and hostility is another interesting one. And then we just called it poverty, but a lot of bad things can happen. So when community breaks down, we allow for homelessness. Like, how insane is homelessness? It's become an epidemic in the last 30 years. It's like 30 years when I started in this work, we had very little homelessness. Now we can step over people, and it's like it's not even this big deal. Now we have debates about whether to give a homeless person money or not, whether it's good for them or not. Well, come on, right? Like, how do we allow this? Right? And if you look at the combo of all those words, that's how we allow it. But look at the opposite. What does a caring community mean to you? So, let's not just intellectualize it, right? It's not about Oshkosh being caring, right? It has something to do with that, and we're going to talk about that in the afternoon a little bit, right, on a systemic level and how we make Oshkosh a more caring community. But what we want to be is we all want to be part of a caring community, a community that will care for us, that will care about us. I was chair of finance committee at church. Like, how do I even do that? Right? I go from not liking church anymore to going back to church for a sense of community for my kids. Then they make me the friggin' chair of the finance committee. Finally, after 5 years, I said, that's it. I'm done. I want to be on the funeral committee, and I want to be on the committee that brings food to people who are sick. I love to cook. That's how I'm going to make my contribution, right? I'm much happier. Right? But it's interesting, right? I had a hip operation a while ago. I had a bad baseball injury and had to get it replaced and fixed up. And And the kind of, like that community is kind of cool, you know, in terms of every day somebody dropped by, and as we say when we bring meals to people, right? And I know this is so kumbaya, so just for those of you who don't like this, just close your ears. But they say, we don't bring food, we bring love. Isn't that great? We don't bring food, we bring love. Food you can get anywhere. You can order takeout, but we bring love, and we put it in the food and you eat it. And that's real good for you. Right? And so it's nice because, you know, it matters somehow. People supporting each other. Inclusive. No one feels isolation. We don't let them. We don't let someone shut themselves out. Right? We care about that and sharing opportunities. Those were the top 3 things that people said. And what was really interesting is that they were all very, very high in the scaling of things. So as we talked about that, this notion of shallow, deep, and fear-based communities became really quite important. Because what we saw is that everyone has lots of community in their lives, literally everyone, including that senior who's isolated in their room, right? They have many opportunities and they're actually part of lots of community, whether they think they are or not, and whether it's the kind of community that matters to them or that's good for their health or not is a whole different ballgame, right? Like I said, we're experiencing community here. We go to a movie, we experiencing community. We go to a baseball game, we do the wave, right? All of those are experiences of community. Anytime that we are communal, even when we go on Facebook, we have X number of friends, that is a communal experience. And it's not a bad one. So let's, first of all, let's bury that idea that shallow community is bad, that Facebook friends are bad. They're not. They're just shallow. But guess what? I don't like to swim in the deep end of the pool all the time. It's friggin' tiring, right? But I love to swim. I love to be in water. So I like to be in the shallow end, thank you very much. You see where I'm going with that? But now what has to happen is, what happens if I want to go into the deep end? Have I been in the shallow end so long that I don't know how to swim unless I'm standing on something? Do I have the skills to go deeper? And so, in my book, it's no longer my book really, it's these 6 editors. You know, God bless them, right? Holy mackerel, because I published this last one with the largest publisher of serious nonfiction in the world, Barrett Kohler, out of San Francisco, and they are relentless, okay? And they've got this kind of, there's this kind of American edge that comes out of Hollywood, where there's always got to be a good guy and a bad guy, right? And they made shallow community the bad guy and deep community the good guy, right? So I wrote it much more Canadian than that, right? So it was much more like, shallow is okay, right? Deep is better. Like, that's all I did, right? And that it's not even better, it's only better when you want it. So, the thing that we ask people to do is shape the future for yourself. Like, if your kids don't have a lot of deep levels of community, then how are you going to help them to get that? Right? If all of their experiences are shallow, then what do you need to join? How do you need to bring your neighbors together? Right? What do you need to do to deepen their experience of community? For yourself, right? Okay, my family's a pain in the butt, and yeah, this article said that they're not as good as friends, but they're still pretty damn good, and they're easy, right? Because they got to put up with me whether I like them or not, or they like me or not, right? So let's go and let's spend some time with them. And for most of us, that's not hard. I love my family just to pieces, right? And I try to spend as much time with them as I can. And that's my extended family, my brothers and sisters. Now, of course, my immediate family, but my brothers and sisters, right? And so the thing is, how do you, I had to do some work in Vancouver. My sister lives in Vancouver. So I booked 4 days off to spend with her, right? Marvelous thing to do, right? I have another sister that lives just half an hour away. She's moving with her family. They're dairy farmers, and so their son is taking over the farm. And so I got really involved in all of that, right? Even though I'm just friggin' busy. But it's so important. I just kept calling her, and she would keep saying, oh, you're too busy, Paul. You don't have to come help me. And then I said, I have to come, Rita. I have to. I'm taking the day off. I'm coming. Give me something to do, right? You know what I mean? And when we have reunions, like we have, I try to make them really special. I often try to host them and then, do special things at Christmas so that the kids will keep coming back. Because it's now the nephews and nieces that I need to have as part of that all, right? It's really easy in many ways. And I know that not all of us have great experiences. I have a brother that's isolated from us, and we're all still trying so hard to get him back, right? But we do it because that's just good. It's good in a whole bunch of ways, and I want them in my life. So I'm going to put that effort into it. That's what I mean. That I want to have as a deep relationship in my life. I want every one of them at my funeral. I want them carrying my casket, or me carrying theirs. That would be my preferred option. Right. So do you know where I'm going with this? Okay, so now let's go beyond that, right? So I ask people, where else do you have it? Well, I'm part of a badminton group. Oh, really? Or I'm part of a book club. Book clubs are really interesting because it's actually not that hard. I'm in one. We've been together for 2 years. We spend about 4 hours together, maybe 3.5, right? Read a different book every month, right? We're called Burgers, Brews, Bros, oh yes, and Books. That's what we call ourselves. And we have a great time together reading books. And so it's not that hard to spend a lot of hours with them. Like it's 36 hours in a year, right? You do a few extra things on the side. It's close to 40, right? After 2 years, I'm at 80. Like we're getting pretty close to one another, right? And it's pretty efficient because you have the burgers and the beers, right? So you choose where you want community. This is the question, and where you're going to invest your time. And that's really important in this discussion, right? Where do I choose to do more? The deep and then the fear-based is, Can I talk about that after lunch a bit more, the fear-based? I'll start with that. It's a bit intense. A couple of things. So I did a lot of then academic research. And we already got this from your health department. But here's just a few. This identity thing for you and for your kids could not be underestimated. That you need other people to understand yourself. You just need that. You can't do that on your own. As much as psychologists would like you to believe that, it's not true. You are not the person who gets to know you. Other people help you see yourself. And you're constantly, right now, as soon as you walked into the room, as soon as you came to that table, you were constantly reflecting upon yourself by sitting in that group. You do that unconsciously for the most part, right? Economic security is another big, big deal. And we've seen that in so many different studies, that where people who are unemployed, you have this saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's kind of true. Because if you have a good sense of community, it's much easier to find a job because a lot of people are looking for work for you. They're bouncing ideas off of you, right? Health is interesting. Dr. Dean Ornish, one of the great cardiologists of our time, how many of you have heard of him? He wrote a book called Love and Survival because he noticed that those patients that had more friendships in their lives lived healthier and longer lives after open heart surgery. So he wanted to study this and understand it better. And he did a number of tests. One was he gave a litmus stick with a cold on it. People sniffed it. And then they filled out a questionnaire. The questionnaire was, if you had a terminal illness, how many people would you tell about it in the first week? Right? And if you had more than 7, your chances of getting a cold statistically were about 30%. If you had less than 3, your chances of getting a cold were closer to 70%. Right? Just an interesting study. I kind of think it probably was a flawed study, but it kind of makes a good point. The one that I loved the most was single moms, right? So single moms who had filled it out and had more than 7 relationships in their lives, they had a birth weight of about 1.2 pounds heavier than those that had less than 3. And that just makes intuitive sense to me. You know, are you eating well? Are you staying warm? Are you sleeping well? Those are really important questions during the birthing process, right? And the more people that are in your life that are helping you with that, you know, and then people bring things. It's like a big garage sale when you have a baby, right? Everybody brings stuff from their homes, all the stuff that they have been holding. Well, or I don't know. It just keeps getting moved around, right? So it's very interesting. We know that there is a direct correlation between suicide and mental health issues related to lack of social connectedness and community. So there's many higher outcomes at that level, and your study proved that as well. Some of the things that you guys talked about was quite interesting around that. The one I like the best is happiness, because I love joy, just in all forms. Like, it's a great party. Life is just like that, you know? But what was interesting is that, you know, so much of our economists have studied the GDP, the gross domestic product, and they've kind of said this is what makes for a great society. Well, some of the best economists in the world have rejected that. And now whole countries like New Zealand and others have adopted the wellness index that John Helliwell, who you saw in that movie, he was the 3rd speaker in that movie. I know John very well. He's out of University of British Columbia. He writes the wellness report for all these economists every year. And John is as straight-laced as they come. He's as dry as toast that's been sitting on the counter all day, right? And so, but he ends every talk like this. So, there's only one thing I need you to remember when I'm finished. Everything else I've said you can forget, especially all those numbers, right? And it goes like this. The more we get together, the more we get together, the happier we'll be. And your friends are my friends, and my friends are your friends. The more we get together, the happier we'll be. Beautiful. You see, that's how he ends. So the entire conclusion of their work is that we create a society that is connected to one another. That we create a society in which people have friendships, where no one feels isolated. Right? When you're going through shit, people are there with you. There's somebody playing with this, is it Ogre in Winnie the Pooh? You know, the donkey? Eeyore. And, you know, even though Eeyore is always sad and down, they always invite him in. You see, you know, he's always invited. He's never isolated, right? So this Eeyore is becoming this kind of spokesperson for mental health, right? And sort of how we're supposed to respond as a society. I think it's just lovely, because I love Eeyore, right? It's kind of... Anyway, let's go here. What I want you to do is, do you want to meet 3 other people, or do you want 2 other people, or do you want to go with your same group? Okay, let's meet other people. Okay, so find 2 people you do not know. We're going to do the same exercise, but we're going to do it about your first memory of community. What's your first, or if you don't want to do your first memory, do your most profound memory, the memory that sticks out with you the most. Okay? Find 2 people you don't know. You know the drill. wait to start until I do my kind of assigning you your role. Isn't that a great one, though? Because, like, probably when you came here, you didn't even give it any thought, but now it's almost urgent to tell someone your story. Because you kind of, and it's so interesting that those first memories, right? And you know, I sometimes do it for a whole hour with people, and I go into feelings and all that kind of stuff, because it really, I think, solidifies for you. If you journal at all, or if you like writing poetry or something, just go with that tonight, right? Play it out. If you like talking to your partner every once in a while, tell them your story. Hear their story. It's way better to debrief. How was your day? Wow. And then you go on and on. Just say, hey, well, no, let's do this exercise. So, okay, one last thing. So, in the afternoon, we're going to work more at how then do you deepen community. And I'm trying to do that, how you deepen community in your own life and the life of your family, or how you deepen community for the clients you serve and the community that you're trying to make better. Because most of us here are part of a human service organization or a for-profit organization that is trying to make things better. So that's where we're going to go this afternoon. We're going to end the day by spending about an hour talking about how do we apply these principles to poverty reduction, right? Because I know a lot of you are part of that coalition. And for those of you who aren't, don't feel like you're not going to get anything out of it. It's not just about poverty reduction. It's about how we organize for large-scale change and why we're having such a big impact. But now, you're going to watch a video. So this is what happened. I'm finished my book. It's at the publisher. It's summer. My son and his friends are sitting on my couch, and they're doing nothing, and they're expecting that's how they're going to spend their whole summer, on my couch, cleaning out my fridge, doing nothing, right? So I go to them, hey guys, do you remember all those great videos your teacher let you do for English projects? She did. She let them do, they did all kinds of stuff, like The Great Gatsby. They did all kinds of videos. They're really good. So I said, what if you all read my book and I gave you $1,000 for expenses, because it costs money to put a video together, but I mean, that was really cheap, right? And would you guys want to do a video? And they said, no thanks. Anyway, it took me 24 hours to turn that around. I always say no is always the opening statement to say not now, right? So when they did, they negotiated hard. It needed to be a rap. So I said, as long as there are subtitles, I'm okay with that, right? So they wrote their own music, which is all electric. You'll see it. You'll hear it. They wrote all their lyrics, which is like poetry. Did all the videoing, all the editing, everything themselves. And when they were done, I loved it, right? And I said, hey, why don't you guys submit this to a competition somewhere? And my wife knew of one, just a little thing. And they sent it to them, and they won first prize. And then when they won first prize, I said, why don't you look on the internet and see if there's anything else out there? And my son had already been on the internet. That just like, as I was telling him, he went to the computer and started looking around. And he said, oh, the United Nations has a World Video Award, and they have a under 17 age category, which was their category. And I said, why don't you submit it? And he said, done. Sent it in. Didn't hear anything for 6 months. They get a call. They won first place, right? The plural. They flew them all, the whole crew of them, they flew to New York, and a limousine was there to pick them up. And there was like a big ceremony in New York, like with hundreds and hundreds of people. And they chose, of all the winners, they chose 3 videos to show on the presentation night, and this was one of them. So Let me show it to you. It's really a summary of my book, and I think it's actually better than my book. They say it better than I could have said it. You know, don't read the book, just watch the video. And it's called Deepening Community Rap.
Bombings in Boston, genocides worldwide. It forces innocent people to run away and hide. Hate and fear bring people together, but something positive would be a lot better. People stick close to overcome their fear. The fact this is forced makes me shed a fair tear. If you don't know why, this would make me cry, because humans shouldn't die for community that is a lie. You can't blame people, fear is just an impulse, especially if you step outside and so just blow your limbs off. You can't refuse, you have to fight, or people in black will come at midnight, bamboozled and bare. Our brothers don't remember where or when they will get to see their family again. Now weapons of mass destruction go to the highest bidder, so let me give you something to consider. Community based on fear opposes itself, so let's put that one right back on the shelf. We really need to stop being so ignorant and dig deeper to find something different.
We need to tell a story and enjoy our lives together, to hinder the storm and colder weather. Caring for everyone in your life, working towards the end goal, making the world a better place for every soul. We need to tell our story and enjoy our lives together, to hinder the storm and colder weather. Caring for everyone in your life, working towards the end goal, making the world a better place for every soul.
When you communicate rarely, alone regularly, and only join events when it seems necessary, you never take the time to accommodate your neighbors. Shallow community does no one any favors. If you don't know your local residents at all, your sense of local friendship is irrelevant and small. If no one ever tries to deepen bonds, consequently, the region that you live in will be spiritless and empty. It's all about forming legitimate relations, meaning you should probably know what your neighbor's name is, meaning you should know that the shallow blame is on each and every one of us if we don't get acquainted. And yo, you always need to give it a try, cause if not you won't know, then you'll wonder why the place that you live in just doesn't provide the sense of acceptance sought by you and I. You only get one chance in this life to strive. Don't just sit there and let life pass you by. Said you only get one chance in this life to strive. Don't just sit there and let life pass you by.
We need to tell our story and enjoy our lives together, to hinder the storm and colder weather. Caring for everyone in your life, working towards the end goal, making the world a better place for every soul. We need to tell our story and enjoy our lives together, to hinder the storm and colder weather. Caring for everyone in your life, working towards the end goal, making the world a better place for every soul.
You see, the point of the song wasn't to sound cynical. The last two verses were to emphasize the pinnacle, the most pure and wholesome community, the one that creates the strongest type of unity, a feeling deeper than the ocean. So let me tell you how to start the motion. Find opportunities for ongoing connection, and your life will point in a whole new direction. In this community, you are always welcome. Try it out, and you'll love the outcome. If you try, you can see how great the world can be through deepening community.
And when each and every human makes acceptance a priority, that's when common people harmonize with their authority. That's when conflicts are resolved by using peaceful methods. People caring, equal sharing, learning useful lessons, joining and expressing thoughts like sisters and like brothers, taking care of yourself and then taking care of others. It starts with getting past our differences and then embracing every walk of life, gay, straight, black, white, or Asian. We started small and let it grow and exercise our patience, cause it will spark and slowly come to each and every nation. When we are cold and we're reserved, our unity is weakened, but through compassion and respect, community is deepened.
We need to tell a story and enjoy our lives together, to hinder the storm and colder weather. Caring for everyone in your life, working towards the end goal, making the world a better place for every soul.